Welcome to a live special edition of the Built on Air podcast, coming at you, I think, our first time on a Thursday. So good to be with you and good to have Max with us. Welcome, Max.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you on. This is first time. So this is a special Super Bowl edition coming up on Sunday, the Chiefs versus the 49ers. Looks like in the community we have some support for the Chiefs. I haven't seen anybody countering with the 49ers, so we'll see.
My son, who we're going to be talking about a lot in this podcast, is a Niners fan. So
okay,
I don't know how that happened. He's an East Coast guy. You know, we support the Giants in this household, but he does what he does, you know.
That works. Yeah, so it should be a good game. But so yeah, we're gonna dive into a base that Max has built custom for this, and with his son, he'll be talking about. But before we jump into that, I think it'd be good to hear more about you and your story and how you came into this world of Airtable.
Sure. So I've been building businesses in the music industry for the last 10 years. And most recently, 2016, I started a marketing agency that began to do real well 2018, 19. And then, 2021 was a, pivotal moment for us as the world went digital and needed those types of services more and more. And I also, throughout that process, came up with an idea to build a piece of software, a marketplace, if you will, that was going to improve the level of service I was able to get to my clients and be otherwise, a tool that would differentiate us amongst our peers and such. And I don't come from a technical background. So when I got to the kind of like post validation stage, I'd already proved the concept to myself. I needed a way to build it. And a colleague of mine mentioned Bubble. This is going back early 2021, so 3 years ago. And I didn't know what that was. I went on YouTube and basically didn't sleep for about 2 or 3 weeks. I was so enthusiastic about, what this was, this possibility that somebody who didn't have any technical experience, who didn't have any, experience writing lines of code, could come in and build the things that I was watching be built. And in order to get that done really at the speed I wanted, I needed to hire an expert. So I hired a Bubble expert out of Germany, and he and I would meet multiple times a week, and we got this thing out the door within 6 weeks, and then we just approved upon it, and my clients, started to use it. But then we had all this data, and if anybody's used Bubble, at least back then, that there's not really a lot of insights you can glean from the data without building your own internal front ends. So I wasn't about to go back and then build not just the client-facing marketplace that we had, but to build the internal systems as well. I was like, this is not surmountable. So the same person who introduced me to Bubble said, you should check Airtable. So I'm on YouTube. So I find Ben Green. All of a sudden, me and Ben Green are meeting every a couple times a week. And by the time, we quickly figured out how to offload the data from Bubble, how to use it in the environment that I needed it, I was like blown away. And I realized that this was the future. I realized that I needed this more in my life. And then I showed him my marketing agency, which was entirely being run off of spreadsheets, extremely data intensive. And he was like, this is the best use case for Airtable I've ever seen. So we kept going and we worked through that. And we rebuilt, I should say, the internal operating systems for my marketing agency using Airtable. And then I took those skills and then I started building out systems for my record label and for my management company and all these things. And it was astounding to me, how much I was able to accomplish with such a small team. And this was before interfaces even existed. So it was like my whole team's inside the base and we're all, having to learn the learning curve of it all. So fast forward 2022, I had to ask myself at the end of the year, like, what is the most important service that I can be providing my clients? And the answer at the time was no longer the marketing services. The specific niche that we had somewhat incubated in 2016 blew up to be very popular. And all my clients had those resources internally. Of course, they were still relying on us to some extent for those services. But nonetheless, it was a little bit, it was less fun. It was less kind of on the bleeding edge. And I was like, that's not the answer. But I happen to know from having had a front row seat to this industry for the last 10 years that this, systems, operations, alignment, workflows is epidemic in the music business. No one's figured it out. And nobody realizes just how data intensive everything is. And you get hired and you get shown the way the spreadsheets were created before you got there, and you just kind of like continue on. And you do that for enough years, in a row, and you get yourself to where they are now. So I decided to essentially create, an agency that would provide expert Airtable development services for the music business, and really start to re-engineer how they operated, particularly on the record label side, the music distributor side, the A&R research side. Those are the folks who are finding the new artists and signing them, etc. And immediately, this new concept was validated because my my clients appreciated that I spoke the language. They appreciated that I had this fresh outlook on their their operating systems and how to come in and add value right away. And it's grown. So I'm about 13, 14 months into that. And, I've got 10, 11 clients, and it's growing, and I'm fulfilled, and, things are good.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they're interested in your services?
Sure. So the website is relational.co. That's relational.co. And it's Relational Co on Twitter. And, you should be able to find everything from the website there.
Awesome. So it's taken over your work life, and it's apparently spilled over into your home and personal life as well, which is what we're going to be seeing now, huh?
So I believe that Airtable is the most important skill that you could be teaching yourself in 2024. You guys on the podcast talk a lot about the future, and is every company going to have, a chief automations officer and these types of things. And that's stuff I've thought about a lot. And the way that I see the world developing is similar to the way I saw it play out with my marketing agency. So my marketing agency was very focused on like social media. And at the time, it was actually quite geared towards an app called Musical.ly, which became TikTok. And there was the rise throughout that period of a job function, a job description called community manager. And it went from like, oh, my daughter is like running our Instagram or something, right, to we have a team of people who are managing community for our brand or for our company or for our artists or whatever it may be. And pretty soon you're on LinkedIn and it's like, community management job is available. Boom. And like these younger kids were all signing up to do it. And they're, in my opinion, oftentimes the most valuable person on the team. But they were kind of like thought of as like an afterthought to some extent. That's playing out again, or I think it's going to play out again. And I think that every company, call it between the next 2 to 4 years, is going to have a implementation specialist, an automation specialist, a chief automations officer, whatever it is that we call it, or that ends up being called, somebody will have that job. So if I'm 15 years old right now, which my son is not quite that old, but if I'm 15, if I'm 20, if I'm 25, even honestly, any age, I recommend you go acquire yourself some Airtable development skills, and at least so that you understand the concepts of why this works and how it works, such that when the world changes and shifts to a point where those skills are in high demand, you'll be ready to go. So with that, I'm always trying to think of, well, how do I enrich my son more? How do I get him the skills that I think he needs to, succeed in life? And I thought of teaching him Airtable. Now, if there's one thing that I know from this journey that I've been on, is you won't learn anything unless what you are working on is directly applicable in your life. You can watch as many videos as you want that talk in the abstract about what these things do and why database structure is important and why junction tables are being used and things like that, which we're about to go over. But if you don't actually witness it and it doesn't solve an issue that you came up against, if it doesn't solve the issue that, like, okay, you have a spreadsheet, but every now and then in one cell, you put a paragraph of text that's like bulleted, and you realize, well, why do I have to put all this text about many different things related to this all in one cell? There's got to be a better way. If you can't solve that using a linked record, and then realize how you can display that on an interface that's scalable to infinity, right? Then you're not going to learn it. So if you're out there and you are agreeing with me and you say, okay, I want to go acquire these skills, I would say go build, yourself a grocery list app, right? A grocery list app that allows you to check off the things you need to go get. And then when you get to the grocery store, you indicate what store you're on, and it tells you what aisles to walk down first. And it tells you, what things are in these aisles. So you're not like looping around the store because you forgot something back at the initial spot or whatever. This is what I do all the time. If you build that and you figure out, and you have to think critically about the way to do it using Airtable, you will learn everything, almost everything you need to know. Yep. So for my son, he's not so much interested in groceries, but he's interested in football. So he's 8 years old. And just for context, for those of you who don't remember when you were 8 or otherwise don't have an 8-year-old or never had an 8-year-old, these guys, like, they know how to read. They go pretty good at computers. They're doing like long divisions sometimes, adding 3-digit numbers together. So they're like, they get it. But, they're not like 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds are not quite there yet. I probably wouldn't have started that yet back then. And they're not like, I don't think ready to do, at least my son, to do any custom coding projects or anything like that. So we had the base, we got going, and we just built upon it. And basically what you're about to see allows him to, throughout the NFL playoffs, allowed him to track the games, the teams in the games, the players on each team. And then during the games, we were able to indicate which players scored, and then, look at a statistics table to see like who's leading in the scoring, who's leading in the passing touchdowns, the rushing touchdowns, and all that type of stuff. And, I think that throughout this process, it's been helpful in getting him exposure. And I think that, as we kind of compound, we're already talking about doing this for the baseball season and stuff like that. I think he'll be able to think critically about how to solve problems in his life or solve issues in life as he gets older. But more so, he won't be bound by the same limitations that I was. So as a non-technical person growing up, essentially, graduating college in 2003, or I should say high school in 1999, right? Tech is going crazy. And then here we are, 2024, that up until I've discovered Bubble and Airtable and all these tools, I felt extremely limited. Like I didn't have the expertise to do this. I didn't have the money to go hire people to do it. But now it's almost like, sky's the limit. I feel like I can accomplish a lot more things. And I want him to grow up with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool.
So let me share. Okay, share screen. Let's see. Share screen. Boom. All right, let's start in Miro because we're going to talk through database structure for a second. Now, this is something that I wanted to make sure that he understood, because if you haven't built this properly from the start, you're going to get to a point where your database doesn't make sense, does not compute, and you can't move forward. And usually in my case, that happens in the event of many-to-many relationships. But again, if you're trying to explain what a junction table is to somebody and you just said, hey, that's the thing that you do when there's a many-to-many relationship, they're not going to get it. Right. So hopefully in this demonstration, somebody watching who doesn't get it might better understand. And maybe someday my son, who's been exposed to it now, might actually be able to internalize it. So we've got teams. One team has many players, okay, as indicated by the arrow. One team has many games, as indicated by the arrow. However, one game also has many teams. So you can't link teams directly to games. So in our case, we have a junction table, which I'll move over, and we're going to call this appearances. Appearances have a title. Sorry, appearances have a team and a game. So we'll move over to this structure here, and we'll have a junction table in red sitting between teams and games. So one appearance record has one team. One team can have many appearances. One appearance has one game, but one game can have many appearances. Now let's talk about how we're going to track the scoring. So if you're trying to say, okay, well, let's take Travis Kelce and he throws the ball to, Patrick Mahomes throws the ball to Travis Kelce. And how do we express that in Airtable? How do we make sure that each side of that play gets credit for the thing that they did and the points that they scored? You might think, okay, well, this player scored a point in this game. Okay, so one player can score a point in many games, but one game can have many players that score a point. Again, it breaks down. So you have to insert another junction table. In this case, I'm going to call it scoring. And what happens in this environment is actually the junction tables kind of compound on each other, because a scoring record is linked to an appearance and a player. And a player can have many scoring records, and an appearance can have many scoring records. So practically speaking, let's dive in. So when I say games, obviously, teams, right? We've got all the teams in the playoffs, and we've got a link to all their players. So each team has many players. But then we have these things called appearances, where it's like in the NFC Conference Championship game, we have a home team and an away team. So NFC Conference Championship game, Niners versus Lions. We have two records for that conference, a home and an away. And the value of a junction table allows you to indicate some unique attributes. In this case, it's just one. It just tells you which team's home and which team's away. And then in the scoring junction table, we have that appearance and the player. So in the NFC Championship game, NFC Conference Championship, Zay Flowers scored a receiving touchdown, and therefore we have a switch formula that tells you how many points he should be awarded for that. And Lamar Jackson had a passing touchdown. Justin Tucker had a field goal on an extra point. So this Justin Tucker example is actually quite important, because Justin Tucker is now associated to this AFC Conference Championship game in two different ways for two different reasons. And because of the junction table, you're allowed to specify the attributes of that specific reason. So he's got the field goal and he's got the extra point. Now, I'm going to show you the interface and how we go about entering the scores in real time on Sundays. But I want to point out quickly what these linked record fields are, because they come into play in the automations. Because of this data structure, we're able to take very specific information and look it up in the players table. For instance, what is the most recent appearance for the team that the player is associated to? That allows us, when we're entering the scores, we don't have to link both sides of the junction. We can just say, who's the player and what did they do? And then an automation takes the record ID of the most recent appearance associated with the team that the player who scored is on, and adds that side of the scoring record, or I should say that side of the junction table automatically. And again, practical example in a way of understanding how linked records and lookup fields can benefit you. If that didn't make sense, try this one. When we go to enter a receiving touchdown, you don't need to go back in and say, well, if Travis Kelce received the touchdown, then Patrick Mahomes passed it. We know Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, so we can look up from the teams table. So in the teams table, we say, well, who's the quarterback and what's their record ID? And then we look that up back to each player's table. So for each player on that team, what's the quarterback's record ID? So if Travis Kelce receives a touchdown, build into the automation that Patrick Mahomes also had a passing touchdown. That didn't make sense. This one probably will. And that is if you do the same thing with the kicker and you're able to say, well, each player in their record, they say, well, players, you're able to say, who is the place kickers? What's the place kicker's record ID for each player? You see all these players are on the same team. They all know who the place kicker's record ID is. You can add a little button, which we're about to take a look at, such that when you add the scoring play, if you indicate that the extra point was successful, you don't have to go back in and say that Harrison Butker kicked the extra point, because the system will create it for you. So we'll quickly walk through the automation, and then we'll get into the demo, and then I'll show you a Glide app to round it up. So when record matches conditions, in this case, where a scoring record has a player, has a type, right, which means like, what was it? Rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown, etc. But it doesn't have appearance. Leave this alone for a second. I'll explain it in a minute. But it does have the record ID from the most recent appearance, then come into these condition groups and get evaluated. So in this topic example, if it's a receiving touchdown, but it doesn't select that the extra point is no good, then simply say that Christian McCaffrey scored a touchdown. That's it. But if you say that the extra point was good, then say that Christian McCaffrey had a touchdown, link it to the appearance of the most recent appearance for that player, and then add the extra point with the record ID from the place kicker and indicate extra point. And then you've got a couple other variations of that depending on combination of whether it's a receiving touchdown or whether this box is checked. And you'll see this in action in a moment. The last thing I wanted to say here is, well, we'll get there in a second. All right, so this is where primarily he would live as he's sitting there and watching the games play out. And he would say, add scoring play. And you come in here and you add the player. So Brandon, let's see this for a second. Brandon Ayuk is a receiver on the Niners. And let's say he had a receiving touchdown. So we're going to say create. And now you're going to see the automation kick in. And it builds the quarterback side of the receiving touchdown. So Brock Purdy passed to Brandon Ayuk. And then because we had the box checked, you can see that Jake Moody also was indicated as completing the extra point. Now, what happens if, and this happened a lot in the early parts of the playoffs, what happens if, hold on, I'm not going to do that because I made an adjustment that is limiting here. Hold on. Still in playoffs needs to include, I'm going to say, or name contains add new. There we go. Okay. So let's say you didn't have the player you're looking for. Then you hit add new, and then you have these fields show up in the these fields show up conditionally in the board.
New
And then you can come in and add a player. So I'm going to say, I don't know what players are not in there, but let's just say like, demo player needs to be added to the Jaguars. Nah, that's not a good idea. Let's say Niners. Niners. And that player is a tight end. And their jersey number is whatever, 52. And let's say that they scored a receiving touchdown and that there was no extra point. So then we hit create and another automation comes in and it says when the scoring record has add new, create the player and then update the record in the scoring table to reflect that player. And then once the player is reflected, then the other automation stacks on top. And you have here demo player had a receiving touchdown. Brock Purdy passed it, but there's no extra point. So these are some like simple to sophisticated, intermediate to sophisticated, Airtable tricks that are otherwise not explainable, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And just a quick kind of journey through the rest of this base. We have exposed him to some different view templates. In this case, when it loads, will be record review. And then I'll come back to this. Give me some latency with Airtable. But let's go into the Glide app. So what if we're watching the show at a friend's house? What if he's out and about and, we're not able to witness every play of every game? We can look it up on our phones, find out what happened, and then come in and enter it on the go. So we've got Glide. Glide is a platform that stacks on top of Airtable and it actually is mostly used as a standalone app builder where you would build out your tables natively within Glide, but I use it on top of Airtable. Then it connects via OAuth and it goes in there and it finds all your data and then it allows you to express it in all the different ways you want. So here, this app is currently on my phone. It can be on your phone if you want. And you can come in here, click on the team, and the team will then display the players. And then the players, you can have their information and see their performance throughout the playoffs thus far. And you can edit that information if you want. You can then move over to the games and say, well, where are we in the games? Okay, if I remember back to, AFC game 2, what was it? And it's Chiefs versus Dolphins, and the Chiefs won 27-6. And the Dolphins scored from Tua Tagovailoa passing to Tyreek Hill. And you can say that, the Chiefs had
a lot more,
bunch of field goals, extra points, couple receiving touchdowns, passing touchdowns. And it's a way for you to kind of review the game. But while you're in the game, so for instance, on Sunday, what we'll do is we'll open up the Super Bowl record, right, which tells you that the Niners are playing the Chiefs. Forget the fact that there's these points. Those are from what we just did. Let me just make sure Airtable is back up and running here. There you go. Yeah. Let's go back to scoring. And let me move this over a little bit. Okay. Shoot, that's not what I wanted. Let's move this over. Okay. We can add the scoring plays directly from that. So we click add scoring play. It's the same form. You pick your player. So let's say Elijah Mitchell. He's a running back for the San Francisco 49ers. And we say he had a rushing touchdown. Extra point is good. Submit. Then after, a variable delay, given the need for Airtable to talk to Glide and whatever, you'll see it just popped up. Elijah Mitchell has scored 6 points. Jake Moody had the extra point. And then the score is updated here. Get yourself a nice back button so we can get out of this. And we could do the same, for either team. If you were to come in here, I'm guessing that information, it's already there. Yeah, Elijah Mitchell, rushing touchdown, and so on and so forth.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's basically it. And then what I was trying to explain here is that like he was able to see the different kind of like out of the box user interfaces, and that he might be able to, you know, consider in the future, right? Maybe he has an idea for a lemonade stand. Maybe he has an idea for an app that where he can play, you know, pick up basketball with his friends. I don't know.
Yep.
He can see something like this and say, okay, well, if I want the, you know, the parent records on the left, and I want the, you know, other information about them and maybe some child record information to be displayed in the center. He's, you know, he's aware. And then the other thing that I thought he would want to be aware of is the whole kind of like list view hierarchy example, where you can have three different tables or data from three different linked tables kind of expressed in the way that we have here. So
very cool. Well, what's his response been to it?
I think he likes, well, he always wants to log the, you know, the time. He always wants to kind of know what's been going on. And I think that he appreciates that he built it himself, like that we built it together, and that it can behave in ways that he wants, you know. A lot of those functionalities, you know, he came up with. He's like, Dad, I don't want to have to log the extra point every single time. And I'm like, okay, good feedback, good beta testing. Like, let's go in and let's improve that for you. And then we went and improved it. And it's not like he's gets it. It's not like he understands or he could do this on his own. But just the fact that he had a problem and then together we solved it, I think is the lesson that we should be teaching, you know, people of any age. So we're starting early in this case.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, just the iterative process to run into a brick wall and figure out a way around it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the fact that like it keeps him, while still using his computer, which is something he likes to do, it keeps him off of Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
And other nonsense that, you know, is not sanctioned.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be the next Airtable app, Mr. Beast videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Max, thank you for coming on and showing that. And it looks like you made a prediction, 20-0 Super Bowl.
Yeah, let's go.
49ers.
Oh, man, let's go. Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be the next iteration, is hook in the AI to like predict based off of the previous scores.
Yeah. When my kid becomes a bookie, you'll know, you'll know why.
This is where it all began. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for coming on, and good luck with everything, and enjoy the Super Bowl.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye.